we are selling air. And this will bring me to the government. We've been telling young people, go to school, get educated, then you'll get a good job, you'll be empowered. But in most of our countries, the people who are living the best lives have no education. The people who are driving the best cars, no education. And Charles Onyango Obo says they are succeeding because of corruption, not in spite of corruption. We've built a culture where we are telling everybody else to comply with governance processes and the instrumental and intrinsic value of governance institutions. And yet those who break the law, either because they are so high up in government, they're untouchable. So high up in the military, they're untouchable. So high up in the police, they're untouchable. They, their children, their cronies, their girlfriends, and their cats seem to live with impunity. And the only people who live subjected to the reformed governance systems and laws are poor people who will never break through the glass ceiling of deified, sanctified, and elevated fiefdom. I want to suggest to you that the reason why governance reforms, which traditionally have followed three trajectories: social concern of governance, which is address the livelihood issues; economic concerns of governance, which is make your governance friendly to the market, or so that markets are able to operate; and political concerns of governance, which is about ensure that power can be conquered, retained, and exercised, either responsibly or to the exclusive beneficiary of those that are doing the reform. Those three have brought us into a point of both possibility and contradiction. And let me go to what sort of reforms we're talking about. No single problem that any of the African countries are facing stands in and of itself and on its own. Whether you are dealing with the abuse of young girls and early child marriage, or you are dealing with something such as narcotics trade, or dealing with cyber crime, or you are dealing with something as bad as fraud within banks, or you are dealing with abuse of authority, everything is interrelated to critical factors: levels of poverty, levels of inequality, levels of exclusion. And my brother Gatete yesterday was educating me, saying levels of education and literacy as well. So it would seem to me, if you take the spectrum of intersections of things, it is no longer possible to take a technicist approach to governance reforms, where you are simply saying, if we fix court procedure, we will have justice. Because if the judges are corrupt, fixing court procedures does not deliver justice. So we have to reform courts dealing with ethics and professionalisms, at the same time reforming penal codes that deal with questions of when and how you exact punishment. Now, there is another interesting thing about intersections. Very few things happening domestically or locally remain unrelated to things happening regionally and globally. Technology has dramatized this. You now can hijack a whole country, undermine a whole country, spread misinformation and disinformation in a whole country. So even if we manage to constrain the number of local citizens who are engaged in misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech, those who sit outside our borders, we engage in the same things, somehow they permeate and go across, because the digital platform enables them to access our citizens as long as they have access to technology. Now, there are opportunities as well. Some of the things we could deny and hide before, as governments, as the police, as militaries, now today, that information can be spread and accessed, because people now have access to information from many more sources other than the government spokesperson, the police spokesperson, and etc. Now, there is danger of disinformation and misinformation, but there is power of alternative information. Regulation and reform in the context we live in is no longer a simplistic matter. It is a complex matter that requires that our institutions have capacities and competencies that go beyond constraint of dissent, repression of dissent, facilitation of exercise of rights, to a holistic understanding of security. And I shared with them the joke yesterday, Madam Chair, that as we seek transparency We must remember what a neighbor of this country said: transparency is not nakedness. So there must be a measure in which you become transparent but discreet. There must be a measure in which when you reform, you don't reform to function for now. You reform to function for the future.